Precision Planning, the engineers and architects for the future jail site come make a presentation to the board, and we'll let them get started now. Liz, Jimmy.
All right, well, thank you for having me. I'm Liz Hudson. I'm an architect with Precision Planning. I've been specializing in jail design since about 1994. We've designed about 20 jails around the state of Georgia, and Walton County hired us in 2009 to start taking a look at the overcrowding conditions at the jail and looking towards the project that was put on the SPLOST. So I'm going to go through first a little bit about the background of the original study that we did, and then talk about the project size that we defined and the budget, and look at a variety of site options. So this is just sort of a snapshot of the situation. We presented a slide like this, I think, in 2010, and what the jail capacity was, as well as how many inmates were in jail at the time, and then we've updated this as of this week. The current jail capacity, and that's the existing jail that's out there on Madison, is 376 general population beds. And then adjacent to that is a work release center that has up to another 64 work release beds. Although we have to be careful about not every inmate is eligible for work release, so that's sort of a limited number. The average inmate population over the past 3 years is about 450, and that includes inmates that are housed in Walton County and that are housed outside of the county.
That includes the work release? That includes the work release?
That does include the work release, yes, sir.
Thank you.
Currently, there are 17 inmates on ankle monitors. I think the sheriff is certified to hold up to 40 on.
We're budgeted for 40.
Budgeted for 40. Again, they have to meet certain criteria to be eligible to be on ankle monitors, and currently there's 17 of those. And there are 1,838 current unserved warrants. I think when we presented before, it was over 2,000, so that's another good number of folks that could be in jail. The line that you see at the bottom, the chart, only charts the number of inmates actually jailed or housed out that are current Walton County inmates. That doesn't take into account unserved warrants or ankle monitor. And what it indicates is that when the addition to the jail was designed and built in 2002, there were 370 inmates at that time that were moved into a jail with a capacity of 376 beds. So for all practical purposes, the jail was full the day that addition was built. And you can see that steadily the inmate population has grown since that time. And projecting how many inmates there will be in 15 years or 20 years is really a guessing game and not a scientific method. You know, we're doing the best that we can to sort of average and let that line continue. But we basically made a recommendation based on the population increase, the arrest records, and the history of the population increase of inmates, as well as recommendations by the Georgia Sheriff's Association for other similar sized counties. So this is just to orient you, the current facility on Madison Avenue. Let's see if I can get this area here is the original jail that was built for a capacity of 128 beds. And then the white area here is the addition from 2002. And you can see how much property is available. There's a creek that runs along right here. Animal control and public works are to the back side of the facility. And this is the work release building adjacent to the jail and the old diversion center adjacent to that.
So that's expected to be open out for another 100.
Is that right?
We're going to start to try 64 to see how we can handle that. That building wasn't really designed for today's standards to house inmates in a secure location. But we're going to try to make it work as long as we can.
So this will give you an idea of how the building's laid out currently. We've got a housing pod here and housing pod here. Each of those are 64 beds, and those are a pod arrangement, which means there's a tower in the middle and the cells around the outside. And the building was originally designed to be added on with similar pods coming out to the side. The addition that was put on in 2002 was designed a little different. It actually was designed more for a direct supervision arrangement, which means that it's a linear type configuration. Each one of these housing units is linear, even though there's a tower in the middle. It's an oversized tower, and the only way really to monitor inmates is to walk all the way into each one of these units. So it's a very staff and efficient building or addition. These pods the inmates can be monitored from one staff position in the middle, which is a tower. The sheriff's administration area is here in the front. Inmates are booked over to this side, and then the public comes in here for visitation. So a typical jail design you would see would have a hard line between where the public can come in and where the staff and the inmates have access, and you really want to keep the public from coming any further than that hard line. The way that the jail is arranged right now, it leaves a little bit to be desired in terms of security because the public has 2 access points to the building. So I won't go into a whole lot of detail with the existing floor plan, but this just shows sort of the circulation paths of inmates through the jail in red, staffing access in green, and then where the public has access to the building in blue. And you can see that there's some overlap and it's not a clean arrangement. And again, this shows you the addition that was done in 2002, and these units that, if it was a direct supervision arrangement, which means that you actually have an officer that sits in the day room at a desk and is in there with the inmates all day long, it could be maintained as a secure facility. However, that's very costly to the county, and most counties don't prefer direct supervision because of the cost. Does anybody have any questions about the existing facility or anything that's been presented before I go into the next section? Okay. What we recommend is a pod arrangement. So when we recommend an addition or even a new facility, we want to be able to watch as many inmates from one staff position as possible. So this pod design is for approximately 200 beds in one pod with one staff position in the center. And it's divided up sort of in pieces of pie for classification purposes. So you'd have a classification or a section, housing section for women, you'd have one for maximum security, a couple for minimum security, a couple for medium security, and it'll be arranged that way. So I have a 3D model over here. If anybody wants to take a look at it, not in 2 dimensions, it might be a little bit easier to understand. It's basically one level with a mezzanine. So the cells are stacked one on top of the other, and then the tower is at the mezzanine level. So back in 2010, when we made the presentation and recommendations, we basically recommended that Walton County, in order to have a facility to last the next 15 to 20 years, you would need 850 new beds, new jail support space, and new jail administrative space, which would be at a cost of about $50 to $60 million, which obviously is not a palatable number for a new jail facility. So we looked at the fact that you do have usable jail space now, you do have a functioning facility, and we looked at options for phasing in the new jail. So what we recommended and what was accepted by the commissioners at the time was a phased new facility, basically a detention center, which would be strictly 2 pods, just inmate housing and jail support would be all that we would build in this first phase. And we would continue to use the existing jail, the 376 beds, and the existing jail administrative space in the interim while the county continued to phase and add on to the new facility. Does that make sense to everybody? So the options are you can either build on to the existing jail to get to that 850 bed capacity, or you could build on an off-site facility and build strictly the detention center portion of it and leave the administrative portion where the existing jail is. So the goals for that phase facility would be 240-bed housing pods, 28,000 square feet roughly of jail support space. And the jail support space those are the spaces that the jail has to have to operate that are directly related to the inmate programs, booking, intake, holding, medical services, kitchen, laundry. All of that makes up what we call jail support space. And then we wanted to look for a piece of property that we could expand in the future for up to 2,000 beds and also allow future expansion for the Sheriff's Administration. So we recognize it's not optimum to have split site. It is optimum to have everything centralized in one location. And so that would be the ultimate plan, would be to find a piece of property where the jail could all be in one place, all under one roof, and that you'd have plenty of room to expand as the county grows. So this is the concept plan that we developed to use in master planning as we looked at the different pieces of property, the project size. Basically, that shows the 2 pods. It shows segregation cells, inmate worker areas, all of the jail support, medical. To the right, you can see the vehicular sally port where the inmates would be brought in, the booking desk, property storage, kitchen, laundry. And this has jail, it has basically jail administration, which is different from sheriff's administration. This isn't the criminal investigators or the patrol officers. This is strictly jail officers. So they have a training room here, lobby, and they would have visitation. And I will point out that what we would like to master plan into this new facility is video visitation, which limits how much the inmates have to be moved. If the inmates can visit at a monitor in their day room, that keeps an officer from having to spend the time to take them to the front of the facility to have a face-to-face visitation with their family members. It also limits how much the public needs to have access to the jail. The public can come and visit with an inmate at anywhere from any remote location. But the way that this is master planned is they would actually come to this facility and they would go to a room right off the lobby and sit at a monitor and visit with the inmates. So that's the design concept. And then I'll go through each one of the site options. Does anybody have any questions before I start going through each one of the sites? All right. These are not necessarily in the order that we looked at them. We actually looked at the existing jail site first and then began to look at other pieces of property. But what this is going to show you is the courthouse is the red star. And so you can see on the map the distance and the proximity of each one of the jail sites that we looked at in relation to the courthouse. And so I have them arranged in order of closest to the courthouse to furthest away from the courthouse. So site number 1 is at Church Street and Hammond Drive, which actually backs up to the courthouse. We'll look at that one first. So this is an aerial view. You can see the building that we're in here, and this is the property that backs up to it. And it's approximately 21 acres, a little over 21 acres, and really has a lot of advantages because the closer the jail is built to the courthouse, obviously the less distance that an officer has to take an inmate to court. So we want to limit that drive time, that time with an inmate in the car. And this piece of property actually gives us the advantage that we could have a secure drive, a fenced, dedicated drive between the courthouse and where the jail would be placed, which is a huge advantage to this piece of property.
But how much can we disturb this area? Is there a creek between that side and the courthouse?
There is, so we
How
would
much
have,
Can you disturb that buffer?
that's a civil engineering question.
You could permit a culvert crossing, just like you would any road crossing a stream.
Okay. So as long as just one crossing, you could just do a culvert.
In the little packets that you have, you've got an aerial view that shows the overall layout. This is just a summary that shows a portion of the master plan on this piece of property. But what we're proposing is that the jail will be accessed off of East Church Street and that the expansion of the pods in the future would actually happen along East Church Street, parallel to it. So I've got a list of pros and cons to this piece of property and an estimated project cost. And I'll do the same thing for each one of the pieces of property. And I'll point out there's not a huge difference in the amount, in the cost estimate from one to the next. So it's really, it's at your discretion to determine which site is in the best interest of the county. The prices vary within about $1 million from one to the next. So the pros, obviously, the close proximity to the courthouse, we can design and build a secure fenced drive directly from the jail to the courthouse. Also, this decreases the operational cost of the jail and labor cost and transport of inmates. This is a piece of property that was previously developed or was about to be developed. Site utilities are available. The site was already graded. The cons, and obviously this is a big con, is potential neighborhood pushback, and it's that obviously can be a deal breaker if it's not going to be accepted by the community. But in terms of setting that aside and just looking at what the advantages are of the property, it gives us enough space to expand to up to 2,000 beds, and obviously the proximity to the courthouse. So the construction cost that we estimated, including the site development and the building, is $24,600,000. There is a land acquisition cost with this piece of property and fees and testing that come to $3.3 million. And then for each one of these pieces of property, we've looked at adding in a project contingency of about $1 million for unforeseen conditions.
What would be the bid space in this?
Originally, this would be 450 beds, and then you would have the ability to add pods off to the left up to 2,000 beds. So this would be, again, this would be 450 beds off-site, which would house the general population of the jail. And then the existing jail would continue probably to house females and possibly minimum security work release, I think is what the sheriff has talked about. So then option number 2, this is a piece of property on Highway 78 and Cherry Hill Drive. What we looked at was the cleared section of this property. I think it's actually larger, but we looked at the 50 acres here. And this one has the advantages of, it's actually the second closest piece of property to the courthouse. It's about 1.2, is that right? I think it's 1.2 miles from the courthouse. So it's centrally located within the county, proximity to the courthouse, which decreases the labor costs and transportation of inmates. There's water and power available. Sewer is not too far away, but there would be a sewer extension required. And with 50 acres, there's ample space for future expansion of the facility.
Excuse me, you didn't mention utility cost on the first one, or did I just miss it? Is there none? I mean, you just mentioned it on that one.
The site utilities were already available on
Okay.
this property.
Okay, so there's none.
That's right. So if you look at the breakdown in your packet, the site development cost for that first one is about $300,000 less than it is on this one.
Okay.
So the cons on this one obviously are the sewer extension and also potentially intersection and access improvements that may be required. You want to speak to that at all?
You know, we added that in, y'all all familiar, Highway 78 is limited access at that point. It's very doubtful that DOT would grant a cut, but the property is accessible by Birch Street or by the interchange at Cherry Hill and 78 now, so you have some options there. Over time, as traffic picks up, you may have, some improvements to Birch Street or the Cherry Hill intersection.
On this one, do you believe they'd allow a right-in, right-out cut? I mean, I know that's what Gwinnett did on theirs on the side of 316.
Take a little political pressure at the state board level. The district guys aren't going to give you a cut on limited access. That's not to say that couldn't be appealed, and it's possible you could be granted a right-in, right-out.
And again, we're showing the 450-bed concept detention center. The way that we've shown it, is one of a number of ways that it can be configured on the site because we've got 50 acres or more to deal with. The way that we've got it shown is actually accessed off of Cherry Hill and expanded toward the back, which we would recommend some screening at the back of wherever the end of the jail is, so that it wouldn't be seen from 78, if that's the way it's oriented. Again, there's a number of ways that it could be oriented on the piece of property. All right, and then option number 3, we'll look at the existing jail. We've actually got an option 3A and an option 3B that we looked at. Like I said, this was the first piece of property that we considered, because obviously having the facility centralized has advantages. So if there was a way to make it work with the existing piece of property, we wanted to take a look at it. Again, there are some efficiency issues with the existing jail. I mentioned how staff intensive this addition is. The pods, even though the way that they're designed it's a good concept, they're very small pods. So they are only 64 beds in each pod, which means obviously you've got at least one officer per 64 inmates in order to monitor the activity in those pods. And so that's one of the reasons we want to make the pods as big as we can for as few staff in order to save on operational costs. So even though the design is good and those are good functioning pods, they are more staff intensive than one new pod would have been. So the first option that we looked at was doing an addition on the north side of the facility, adding the 2 pods, adding the jail support space, and connecting to the existing facility. So this area that you can see, this dashed line, that's actually the existing booking area. So the first concept we looked at would be we would build the jail support and a new booking area over here, 2 new pods, and then, well, probably 1 new pod, and then it would be a complex phasing issue with demolishing the existing operating pieces of the existing jail. The pros on this option are that you would gain a centralized facility. The property is already owned by the county, so there wouldn't be land acquisition cost. But we do believe that there are a number of cons to this. One, you can see there are 2 existing county buildings that would have to be demolished in this particular concept.
One of them's that work release, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
What's the other one?
It's the old diversion center.
Okay. That we just removed.
That's right.
What if you just put one down there?
Just put 1 pod?
Yeah,
Well,
that would put you up close to 800 beds.
you would have 224, and then you would have the 376.
And the 100.
Well, I guess the issue would be in this particular
You wouldn't
layout.
have to tear down the one we just remodeled.
Well, we looked at a concept where we could save the diversion center that's just recently been remodeled and do 1 pod. The problem is that the jail support space, in order not to conflict with that diversion center, the jail support space would take up this space here, and then the pod would be actually a little further back and get a little closer to the creek. And then by the time you got ready to build that second pod, you would actually be in the creek, and we'd be looking at stream mitigation and some wetlands issues with that. It's certainly it's an option, but it has complications. The topography is also very challenging. The site, the grade drops off towards the creek that's behind it. Like I said, the stream and the wetlands, and we had a professional go out probably a month ago and look at it and did determine that there are wetlands there present, and gave us an estimate of how much permitting time it would take per how many, whatever length of stream had to be mitigated. One of the big cons is construction of an occupied secure facility. One of the reasons that we look at additions to jails in just adding housing pods is because you don't interfere with operations as much as if you just put a clean housing pod back behind a functioning jail. Whereas if you come in and try to do a renovation to a secure facility that's being operated, it can be very messy. We've had projects done like that, and it's very tricky. Also, the demolition of the 2 existing buildings, and probably the number 1 con for this is that you're limited on the future expansion. Unless you decide to come in later and demolish all this existing facility and then add in those areas, you're going to be very limited after this 450-bed addition gets put on. Does anybody have questions about this? I know it's a complicated scenario.
Now, would there be any stream mitigation with the 2 pods that you're proposing on this?
No, sir, not the way it's
Okay.
shown here.
It would be the next time, 10, 15 years from now, every 10 years we have to build a jail, seems like. That's, isn't it, Sheriff? I mean, it seems like every other splosh, we're building a jail.
What would that cost, that mitigation, just estimate?
Well, it depends on how much of the stream you disturb. And so if we were to come back here and put 2 more pods, which there are more issues with that because you'd be into animal control, we'd have more demolition and that sort of thing. But I think if you're under 200 feet, or, is that right?
Yeah, I mean, you know, you can pay, you probably run into $75 a foot for stream mitigation if we have to move the stream. You know, under this scenario, you probably wouldn't have to do any stream mitigation. If we try to save the diversion center, which recently been renovated, we have to shift things back toward the creek. That's when we're gonna incur some
So there
mitigation.
would be mitigation this time if you save the diversion center.
Correct. That's right. So you'll notice in the cost breakdown that the construction cost is a little higher on this estimate because of the renovation and the complication of that. But obviously this next goes down because there is no land acquisition cost. So overall, it's a little higher cost than the previous 2 options.
Jimmy, if we decided to go with this option here, we decided to save the diversion center and shift it back, give a wag about what would the mitigation cost? I mean, just give you an estimate of it, with nothing on this thing. Is it major or minor?
Well, I don't know if we've got into it detailed enough because we're gonna actually have to relocate the stream. When we relocate the stream, we gotta factor in how does that impact parking and animal control and things that are on the backside of the stream. I don't know if we've done enough site work or looking at that to tell you how far we have
I
to
think
move.
you should vote for Congress for that.
I tell you, I bought some, we put in the culvert, and cut it 200 foot long, it cost us $80,000 just to get the stream mitigation done.
But-
Not counting putting the culvert in, just
In the scope of the project, $8,000 would be massive.
80,000.
Oh, $80,000,
80.
okay.
That was 200 feet.
Yeah, you'd definitely be in the 6 figures.
The other
All right,
thing.
that's what I was looking for, okay.
The other thing to consider with this is these pods have to have an evacuation yard behind it, which is a fenced area. You've got to allow 15,000 square feet per inmate that they can evacuate to that's at least 50 feet away from the facility. So you're going to have a fence back here. I mean, you basically are evacuating them into the stream area with this scenario, which is doable. That's not impossible. But you can see that that fence gets further and further back if you push the pods back further.
If it's a fire, they ought to be over the stream.
They used to build a water landing deal, didn't
And we can come back to this plan if we need to, if there are more questions. The next one, this is option 3B, and this is an existing jail expansion to the south, which is actually not so much of an expansion as it is a new facility to the south side of the existing jail. And you might have noticed on the aerial, the land, this is basically looking at this area here, and the stream is at about that location, I
That's down
believe.
there towards the lake, right?
they? On that.
Yeah, down, going in that direction.
From the south on 11. Yeah. So this is not much different than the concept that was shown on the Cherry Hill site and the Church Street site. It's 450 beds and basically a detention center to the south of the existing jail. The reason that we don't make a direct connection, there are several reasons. It's this addition wasn't really designed to be added onto, and it sits at a much higher elevation than this area here. So what we would propose if we do design and build something like this is that we have a connecting walkway so that we can make use of some of the existing services, laundry or kitchen, or it could be shared between the two. And what we also proposed and talked about is potentially turning portions of this into work release. Maybe this parking can be work release parking. And in the future, this option gives allowance for at least 2 additional pods, but as they go back towards the stream, obviously you get closer to the big money of mitigation. The biggest problem with this is if you're familiar with the property, it's a very low-lying area and very wet area. We had testing done on this when we were looking at this option, and we are required to have special foundations, lots of dirt brought in. And so the site development cost on this particular option is $2.2 million before you even bring concrete out to the site. So very, very high site development cost sort of offsets the fact that the property already belongs to the county. So this is actually the most expensive option. Even though it does have some pros, it's, it's convenient to have a centralized facility right there. You would have sheriff's administration conveniently located right adjacent to the detention center. And then obviously the property already being owned by the county. But you would have limited future expansion, not impossible future expansion, but you could have up to about 900 beds here in this facility. But the other cons are the unsuitable soils, special foundations, and a lengthy approval process for stream and wetlands mitigation if we do have to get into further expansions.
What is length?
I was told
Years?
2 years, yes, for that permitting process, if we were to go back into the wetlands with those additions. Are there any questions about this one or the previous one? Okay, so the next option, option number 4, is a piece of property on Highway 11 that's about 60 acres. This is south of the existing jail. This piece of property is the furthest from the courthouse, down along Highway 11. Again, it's the same concept. The front of the jail would face Highway 11, and then the jail would be expanded toward the back of the site. Plenty of acreage available for future expansion of the facility, easy access to Highway 11. The cons in this case, potential neighborhood pushback, and the distance from the courthouse, a little bit further for the officers to have to travel, bring inmates to court, and there would be significant sewer extension cost. I don't recall how long is that sewer extension, Jim?
And this site will require the closest sewers in the industrial park at Leroy Anderson. The problem here, we'd have to build a pump station on site, pump it over to Leroy Anderson. Talking to the city, we'd also have to upgrade the next pump station, which is already at capacity. So the sewer extension costs for this one are in the $450,000 to $500,000 range to provide sewer service.
Is that in that number?
Yes.
It is.
I mean, this one, as far as land prices, I think very reasonable, but the utility service costs really bumped it back up, sort of negated those savings.
That is the 4 sites.
We have, I don't know if y'all saw this one, Alcove Station, do y'all get this map? Across, going up 78, actually across Alcove River, all over that. I believe Richard Hawk and Don Fox.
Yeah, I think
Contact
that
Yeah, we've got, I met with Richard yesterday, and we've also got another property that's been turned in. We've taken a preliminary look at it, we haven't went to the level we have with these sites, we just haven't had time to look at utility extension costs.
I'd like the same consideration on that, because give us something to look at, really.
That's what I was gonna say, that they may be, up to this airs and gets out, they may be, you've talked about it
We
before.
advertise for
that
RFP,
that they
and
may
let
be-
everybody bring in a presentation, and see what they got.
They fine.
Huh? Give everybody a fair shot at it.
And, because there may be several other property owners out there that's interested, and so I'd
Sure.
be all for that.
Have you thought about, do you have any figures on how much per mile further that you get from the courthouse it costs you and your budget?
We have done a cost study on that, Major Harris can give us those numbers. Common sense will tell you the further away you are, the
Oh,
more
yeah,
cost.
this last one's on out there, that's why I was.
Well, when you look at transportation costs, you're not just looking at gas and tires and maintenance too, you're looking at liability.
officers and
Got Kirby over here can tell you about every time an inmate stubs his toe getting in and out of a van, transport van, we gotta go to court about it. And that's, you gotta figure all that in too. If I could, I would like to interject my views on what Liz presented. Could you go back to the very first slide on these, please? Where it shows the numbers and the line graph. And all of you have heard me say this, but I'm doing this for the public's information also. These numbers, you see the current unserved warrant numbers. Do you think that we're going out looking for these people? No, I can't. I got nowhere to put them. But the people that have taken these warrants for these bad checks or for whatever it is, they don't want to hear that. They want these people in jail. An interesting fact that Major Harris brought up this morning to Liz and I is that 4 to 5 people a day are being picked up on these warrants. They may be in Alabama, Tennessee, DeKalb County, Jenkins County, wherever, and we got to go get them. And we got to put them in jail. And that's happening 4 to 5 times a day. And those are people that we can't slap on ankle monitors, we can't put them on some kind of home supervision. We got to keep them in jail till they go to court. And those numbers impact our jail. And one thing that is severely impacting our jail, and is about to very severely, is your governor's new judicial, what's it called?
Reform.
Judicial reform.
True.
What that's doing is, judicial reform sounds good in the press, but what it's really doing is saving the state money. They're keeping people out of prison and they're putting them on probation. And when they violate this probation for not reporting a dirty drug screen, not paying their fine, guess where they go?
County jail.
County jail. And it's increasing our population number. And this line graph isn't showing that.
has the, them doubling the amount of the felony, has it?
Absolutely. We
How
have
has that
tiers.
affected it?
We have tiers of incarceration now, levels of crime, so to speak. If you're on level 1 or level 2, you don't go to prison anymore. Used to, you did. You have to wait till you get to level 3 before you go to prison. So guess where level 1 and level 2 are going? Going to county jail, and it's across the state. And Walton County is one of the, I don't have to tell y'all, one of the fastest growing counties in the state. Even with the economic downturn, we're continuing to grow. I don't have to tell y'all that. Y'all very well know that, because you haven't planned for it. So these numbers aren't indicating judicial reform and all the other issues that we're dealing with. So we're continuing to grow. And now, Liz, could you go move this thing up to the current jail? Any one of those. Give me that'll work. If you look at the new addition to the jail, and most of you on the board have been inside that jail. And these,
Voluntarily.
I'm sorry,
Voluntarily.
voluntary. Right. And since we started this process of looking at a possible jail site, I'm getting contacted by lots of jail experts. I didn't know we had so many jail experts in the county, but we do. But I don't have any of them volunteering to come down there and walk inside that jail and feed these inmates and watch them and medicate them and clothe them. And all of you's been in that new addition, and you know how dangerous it is for those deputies in there. And it's dangerous for the inmate too. And people say, well, I don't care about the inmate, they need to be in prison. Until it's their child, or their grandson or granddaughter, or cousin, husband, or wife. Then they're concerned about the care they're getting in that jail. And this this right here where we are now is dangerous. It's just dangerous. I spend too much time telling somebody why their son hung himself in a jail cell. And all that's happening in this new addition right here. Kirby's spending too much time on litigation while these people are hanging themselves in this jail, because we're not watching them. We're watching them with all we can watch. It's just a difficult task. And that's costing us money. And when you're talking about expanding right here at the current location, you're talking about housing out inmates. You're talking about disrupting the office of sheriff. I can't do what I'm expected to do by Constitution with this building torn down and trying to take in inmates and move them all over the state to housing. I can't do that. That's what I'm obligated to do by the Constitution. And when you're talking about tearing down here and moving this over, that cuts out the operation of the office of sheriff. Common sense. Now, also I'm a taxpayer in the county, and I'm speaking as a taxpayer now. If we put a Band-Aid on this, my kids and possibly grandkids are going to be dealing with it again 10 years from now. And they're going to be saying, Daddy, why ain't y'all do this when you had the chance? I don't know what I'm going to tell them, but you got to look at the job that these deputies have to do inside that facility. And that's what I'm asking you to do. I don't want to have to, who knows, I might be sheriff only 3 more years, they may kick me out, but I plan on sticking around a while, and I don't want to have to continue to keep dealing with this situation every 6 years. And now I think we have the opportunity with land prices to do something about it long term. Every major corporation or company and everybody else does long range planning. Well, this is a perfect opportunity to do some long range planning for the people of Walton County. And I hear it everywhere I go. So that's my 2 cents. And if I got any questions I can answer.
I would like to hear those numbers sometime. I'm sure all of us would like to hear the numbers on how much it costs to transport people further you get away from the jail, from the courthouse.
We'll get you those numbers. We'll even get litigation numbers for you too. I had a van, 2 van loads, 2 15-passenger vans. One stopped short to avoid accident. The other van ran into the rear of them, and they were both loaded with inmates. All of them had neck injuries. So
I bet the drivers didn't have neck injuries, did
No.
they?
They'd had something else on.
Any questions for the sheriff? Any questions for Liz? What, Commissioner Ayers, I guess what we'll do is what you had requested, just put a little ad in the paper, because there probably is other land out
Just
there.
have to put out an RFP like we do for anything else we do, and give everybody a fair shot at it, and then nobody's spotted.
We had talked earlier this year that we were going to look at the numbers of the sales tax coming in anyway, so we're still not in a drastic hurry because we don't know exactly how the dollars are going to come in. We know they're going to be less than what they were previously, but they have increased. So we got to look at the dollars and see where we're at, and then we'll probably have another meeting similar to this probably in another couple of months. Is what I figure as we get a little farther down the road and get. I want to also look at the internal cost of what it would cost to run 2 facilities and see if that's affordable. I think that's going to be something that'll weigh pretty heavily on us as commissioners. It's one thing to build a brick and mortar and metal building, but then you got to be able to operate it and run it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and so that's going to cost a little bit there. So we've got a lot of variables that we've got to figure out along this path as well, and so land is going to be one thing, but the long term, and as the sheriff said, you want to do this, you want to do it one time and not have to do it anymore, and so we need to look at what we're doing right. Anybody got anything else? Appreciate it.
We're under the gun so much to do anything, but I would like to see us not drag our feet on it too. I think 30 days, we need to have another meeting, and we need to start either eliminating sites or choosing a site.
How long would it take for an RFP? I don't know how, Lee, you've done that before, haven't you? Or you've been involved in it? How long is it, if we put out one, how long do you give it, 2 weeks, or what do you give them to send back in?
It's usually, it depends on the type of project. I mean, you're talking about.
You've been talking to
land
Jim.
No, but there's a one thing for construction projects and road projects and land acquisition, so off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you exactly how long.
That'll have a lot to do with when we
I'll
get these in here.
check with Rhonda and see, shoot y'all all an email tomorrow and let you know the time pattern. But yeah, I agree. And so, we'll see
Maybe
where.
Jimmy can tell us some more about that stream litigation too. That's gonna figure in.
But I have been in some other, I've been in this jail, I don't like going anywhere that I can't unlock the door behind me. But this jail's dangerous over here. I mean, these officers that has to go and physically look into areas, y'all know that, most all of you've been in over there. I went into some more modern jails recently that, you know, one man standing up there watching the whole thing. I feel like if us seven's gonna go home and go to bed at night, I'm not saying an officer can't get hurt or whatever in this county, but I think we need to do everything we can to avoid that. And if we don't, then you don't deserve to be sitting up here. So I think we need to not drag our feet on it. We need to get out. Anybody that's got land, I guarantee they'll get it back within 2 weeks, Diggy. But we got some good hard facts, pros and cons on all the sites right here we need to look at. But we need to start moving too. We need to drag around.
Good point. Anything else need to be brought before us? All right, we appreciate everybody coming out tonight. Thank you, Precision and Leah, Jimmy, and Sheriff. Thank y'all.